What I'm going to show you in this video clip is how to strip and rebuild the Weihrauch HW80. I have been looking for one of these HW80s for some time now. After seeing a lot that is for sale out there, some are a bit battered and they've had a hard life. Not saying that they can't be restored, but sometimes it's not a very economical repair to bring them back to their original state when they're too far gone. So I did come across this rifle here. It seems overall in good condition. The barrel seems nice and clean externally and internally. Also the stock seems in quite good condition. The wood doesn't look like it's had too much of a hard life. And I have been told by the gun dealer who sold me this that it is in its original state, it hasn't been modified in any way, and it is firing slightly just under the legal limit for the United Kingdom. Just turn the rifle over there and look on the bottom side of the barrel where the serial number is located. I have been told that this was manufactured between 1981 and late 1982. Just before we begin stripping the rifle down, I'll just show you a few of the tools I've got lying about for this job. Small nylon hammer, different size screwdrivers, one narrow flat and one a larger flat, a couple of punches that can be used for drifting the pins out, and a spanner just in case the back block is a bit tight, and a rubber pad there to use to knock stuff out so nothing gets damaged. Okay, I'm about to begin the strip down. Now first of all I'm going to start by removing the trigger guard. You will see the trigger guard has two side screws. There is a large headed flat screw in the front of the trigger guard, which I'm removing there now. And in the rear of the trigger guard there's a smaller flat headed screw. Obviously this is why we need the two sized flat screwdrivers to accommodate the heads of the screws so they don't get damaged and chewed up while we're removing them. And once you've removed the screws, the trigger guard should just simply pull out, removing the longer front screw with it. Now after that, you'll notice that there's a screw either side of the front of the stock, and we are going to remove those. Simply unscrew each one in turn. Now in the stock there's a small star shaped washer. That one there, that's on the end of the screwdriver. It's best to try and remember to remove those, because as you're working with the gun they normally do fall out and they're easily lost. And that's the other star washer that's been pulled out of there. Now you can simply remove the stock from the rifle. Once it's removed from the rifle, just to give you a quick look, there's nothing else to the stock. Very simple design. Unless you want to remove the recoil pad, but for the purpose of this video I don't think that's necessary. And we'll just put that to one side so it doesn't get scratched or damaged while we're doing the rest of the job. All I'm going to do here just before I begin stripping the rifle down is just removing some of the dust that accumulates between the rifle itself and where the stock sits. Just try and keep things as clean as possible. Now turning the rifle so the right hand side of the rifle is facing up over. We're now just going to get a punch that fits the two trigger pins. Obviously you do want the correct size punch. Don't try and bray anything through that's the wrong size, you'll just simply damage the rifle or flatten the heads of the pins so they can't be removed correctly. And we've got one pin there at the rear and one pin there at the front. Now you're going to be drifting these down from the right hand side of the rifle and out through the left. I'm just going to put this rubber pad under the rifle. And get the little punch. Couple of light taps will bring these pins through, no problem whatsoever. And if you turn the rifle over, you'll see now that the pins can be removed quite easily. The front one is a little bit tight on this rifle, so I'll just simply extract it with a pair of pliers just so there's no damage. Now these two pins that I've removed, as you can see here, they are different lengths, different sizes. If I can just put them in the plier so you can see on the camera. You can't really get this wrong by putting it back together because there's a short one for the rear and a longer one for the front of the trigger assembly. And then you just simply pull the trigger assembly out like that. It's not a great deal to them. Just give it a quick wipe there. Inspect it for any damage. This one does look in decent condition. And we can just pop that to one side for a moment. And there is the safety pin being removed. It simply lifts out like I did there. And then we can just pop that to one side for a moment. Some people may want to remove the scope prior to start disassembling the rifle. I'm just going to leave it on for this example. It just gives the rifle a bit of stability to stop it spinning around while I'm working with it at this point. Now is what I'm going to be doing is removing the bolt that goes through the brake action. Now actually this is a bolt with a stud on. So working from the right hand side of the rifle again, using the correct size screwdriver. You simply unscrew this, and that is the stud, what's equivalent to the nut from the right hand side of the rifle. Now in here there is a spring washer. Once again, try and remove the washers because they're too easy to lose. I'm just going to give this one a little tap from the other side with a rubber handle screwdriver. And there we have it. Now working from the left hand side of the rifle, I want to remove the bolt that goes right through. So just begin unscrewing this normally. Now they aren't threaded all the way through, and these sometimes can be a little tight. So once I've started it coming out a little, all I'm going to do here is just get another punch, and using the handle of the screwdriver again, just giving it a little tap. And that brings it out so I can turn it out by hand. And that's the bolt out, with once again there's a washer on the bolt. If it does stay in the rifle, you know to remove it so it doesn't get lost. Then simply start removing the barrel, like so, and removing the cock and shoe. Now you will notice on the barrel where the bolt came through, there is a shim either side. As you can see here, very thin shims. They're normally stuck like on this part of the barrel with a bit oil or grease. One either side, very important not to lose those. Now we've got the barrel off the gun, I'm just going to give it a quick wipe down, like I say, just to keep the job as clean as possible. Now I will show you what I've replaced prior to this, which is the breech seal washer, which is located just there. The one that was in this rifle was very hard and corroded due to its age. Makes all the difference by replacing this. I'll show you that a little later on. This rifle still has its open sights fitted. Very easy to remove, but I don't think it's necessary just in this video at this time. And we can just put the barrel to one side for a moment. Now what I need to do now is remove the back block from the rifle, and that is this section here. And you'll notice there's a line where you'll see where it splits, where the divide is, which is located just under the rear scope mount. And all I'm going to do now is, using a small Allen key, just remove the scope from the rifle. And just for reassembling, if you take note of where the rear scope mount's sitting, so you get the scope back on the gun in near enough the same place. It has got a lining pin in the rear mount, which I'll show you once we start reassembling. And once we've got the Allen keys loose, that holds the scope mounts to the rifle, the scope simply comes off like that. Now this scope, it's not a particularly expensive scope. It's the Hawk Eclipse 4x12x40. It was on the rifle when I purchased the rifle, and I think it should be more than suitable for the range I'm going to be shooting at and the purpose I'm going to use the rifle for. It has got double locking mounts on, as opposed to single mounts, and for what I'm going to use the rifle for, I think these should just be fine. Now what I'm going to do here is remove the back block. I'm just going to give it a little wipe there. Now to do this, to start it off, they do come off anti-clockwise and screw off. So I just use a spanner that's a loose fit. And just to save making any marks on the gun or creating any damage, I just put the end of the spanner in a cloth. And begin turning anti-clockwise. Then after that, this can be removed by hand. Now I know this rifle's got the original spring in, so it doesn't come off under tremendous pressure. But if you are going to start working on a rifle that's had a replacement spring or possibly an ox spring fitted into the rifle, it will come off under tremendous pressure. It'll literally take your hand off when it comes off, so you will need to use a spring compressor or the correct tools to remove the back block. But like I say, the rifle I am working on, I know it's original and they don't come off under tremendous pressure, as you can see. And that's the back block off there. Now all I'm going to do here is pull the spring out from the piston chamber and just give the spring a wipe down there and remove the top hat from the end of the spring. Like I say, all I'm doing here is giving the spring a good clean, just so we're not getting filthy while we're working with it. And apparently, according to the firearms dealer I bought the gun off, that is the original spring from this gun. Now here, I'm just going to push the piston up with a small flat-ended screwdriver. Just get a hold of the end and out it comes. Very simple to do that. And once again, I'll just give this a quick wipe. And just wipe the piston seal on the end there. And that's basically all that is to them. Now this piston seal here, I have replaced that. I will show you shortly the old one that I did remove. And just looking inside the piston there, up the spring guide. At this stage you can just check the piston for signs of wear and rubbing. Obviously the piston I've removed from this rifle seems in reasonable condition. And just a quick look inside the piston chamber. Everything seems fine. I'll just give you a look here. That's the piston seal washer, the white one which is on, which I have replaced. And the old one I did remove. Now this doesn't look in too bad of condition, but for the price of them, you do get the breech seal washer and the piston seal for around about £8 to £10 for the two of them. So while you've got the gun stripped down, you may as well replace those. And like I said earlier, that is your breech seal washer, what just fits in there. They simply flick out and push in. They're relatively inexpensive and they make a hell of a difference to the gun and its overall performance. So there we have it. That's the gun stripped down. Now before I start reassembly, what I'm going to be using is this lithium grease. I know people's got different preferences about which grease to use. Now don't go overboard, as all I'm going to do now is just give the piston a slight coating of grease. just obviously so it's moving freely. Now I'm not going to go too close to the front where the piston seal sits because I want no fluids or grease in front of that seal. All that will do is create dieseling in the gun and we'll have problems at a later date. Now I'm just going to remove some of the excess of this grease. I just want a nice thin coat without putting too much on. Like I say, you want to keep the grease and all your fluids well away from the piston seal itself. Now the spring, just before I reassemble that, I am going to give that a coating of grease. Now all I'm going to do now is put a line of grease on a cloth, spread it around a little, and wind the spring through the grease just to give it an even coat. I'm not going to go overboard with the grease. Like I say, I'm just going to give it a nice fine even coat. I know people has got other preferences. Some have them filled with grease. Personally, I don't see the reason why to do that, but it's personal preference. I remove the excess lumps of grease. I find when you've got too much grease in the gun, all it does, it collects dirt and it can create problems in the future. So I'm just going to remove the lumps of grease just with a cloth. So I think that's lubricated enough as it is, and I'll just put that to one side. So now I'll start reassembling the rifle. You will notice I haven't washed anything out because I have had this rifle apart prior to this demonstration, so I know everything's clean inside. Now I'm going to start by putting the piston back in. Now be careful because obviously we don't want to damage the end of the piston seal with the threads when you're passing them when you first enter it. So if you just take your time like this at first, just till you get past the threads, and then you can just slide it in. And now I just take a small screwdriver and line the guide up what the cotton shoe sits on, and then push the piston down into its place. Now I'll just take the spring and pop the top hat in the end of it and slide that straight down back into its position. Now all I'm going to do here is take the back block, and I am going to use some dry Teflon lube. I do prefer this for just general lubrication, and I'm just going to apply a bit around the threads. It just makes it a lot easier if the rifle does need to be dismantled again. Things come apart that much easier. And I just remove the excess off. And now I'm going to put the back block back onto the rifle. Now as you can see here with the standard spring, I can do this without any spring compressors, just by simply lining it up, pushing, and away we go. Just screwing it straight back on in a clockwise rotation. Now what you need to do here is obviously line where the trigger sits in, line the casings up so that they are perfect and there's no lip. All I do here is take a screwdriver and feel for the joint, and you can move it clockwise or anti-clockwise until you get that perfect. Yep, everything's fine there, and just if you turn the rifle round and look at the top along your scope reel, you will see that that is fitting perfect as well. Now what I'm going to start doing now, just after a quick tidy up and move the oil out of the way, is refit the barrel. Now I just put that small pad there just to stop the rifle rolling round while I'm trying to reassemble it. And first of all, I want the cock and shoe put back into the guide and up the channel, which is on the side of the piston. And we simply put it back into position like so, and then roughly line the hole up where we're going to put the bolt through. So working from the left hand side of the gun, what we're going to put in now are our two shims, the two thin shims that we removed earlier. And I'm just going to apply a little bit of dry lube on the clean shims because they are a moving part, so a little lubrication won't be amiss. And I just slide one shim in at a time so it's roughly in position. Once again, take something just to line it up. And pop the other shim in the other side. And we're just lining the two shims up here with the hole, just so we can enter the bolt. It can be a bit fiddly, but just be patient doing this, because you don't want to start screwing the bolt in and finding you're up against one of the shims. You'll just bend or distort the shim. And once you're happy with that, you can start entering the bolt. From the left hand side of the gun, remembering that the two spring washers need to go on either side. And if you just put the spring washer on the end of the bolt that's poking through, and the nut, it's the small cap that we took off to the right hand side of the gun, what screws onto the end of the bolt. Now these need to be tight, but don't over tighten them. I tighten them gradually and try a side by side action and make sure that the gun is operating as it should, so it's not too slack but also not too tight. and just a tiny little nip either side. Make sure there's no movement, and that should be fine. Now what I'm going to do here is just replace the trigger unit into the back block. And if I can just show you here, I'll just uncock this. Now I fit these in the cocked position, so all you do is push the cock lever down like so, and it's in the ready to fire position. Now I start entering this into the housing, but not fully in until you've got the safety pin back in the hole it came out of. As you noticed, there's a spring at the bottom of that hole, and it is spring loaded, the safety. Now take our 2 pins, remember one longer than the other. One for the rear, one for the front. And all I do, I simply push the front one in first. And if you just take the right size punch, and tap the pin into its correct position, making sure that it's in quite evenly, that it's not through one way too far, and just little taps like that, and just keep having a look, just so we get the pins in evenly and it's the same gap at either side. And once you're quite happy that you've got the pin in evenly, just pop the safety back in. Like I say, spring loaded. At this stage the trigger mechanism can be pivoted from the front pin, and the safety can be removed and replaced very easily at this stage. Now I'm just going to push the trigger mechanism to its final position and insert the rear pin. And once again just tap that through so we get that through evenly. And the final couple of taps just puts that pin so it's in a central position, so you can see the same amount of pin either sides. Now just before I go any further, I'm just going to try the rifle as it is, just to make sure everything's working. And just push our safety in so it's ready to fire, and fire the gun. That seems to be working fine. So now we know everything's working as it should. I'm simply going to refit the stock. Now, I'm jumping ahead of myself a little here. What I prefer to do before I fit the stocks is take some more of our dry lube and I just put it on the rifle underneath where the stock sits, just as an added protection. It just saves water condensation building up under there and damaging the steelwork. And now once we put our stock in position, we're just going to simply pop on the trigger guard. And this one has been a little fiddly there. It just doesn't seem to want to go down into its correct position. Now it's been a bit awkward, so all I'll do there is just push the trigger mechanism across slightly with a screwdriver, and there we are. That just pops into position. See, it's got to sit nice and flush and beat all the weight down. Then we take our long screw for the front and the short screw for the rear of the trigger guard, and just begin to put them in position. And just make sure everything's lined up, and we can give them a little nip. Make sure the screws are tight, but don't over tighten them so that you damage the screw heads. And once again, use the correct size screwdrivers so you do eliminate the damage to the screw heads. Then I'm just going to go around the rifle and give all the screws that hold the stock on a final nip, just to make sure everything's nice and secure with nothing. Now I'm just about to pop the scope back on, and if you noticed in the back block, these two holes here, which I've just pointed out, that is where the scope sits. Now, like I said earlier, the rear scope mount has a lining peg on, and we are going to be using the front of the two holes to put the scope back on where it came off this rifle originally. And once you've got it into place, just take the Allen key and just give them a little nip. I don't fully tighten these screws at this stage, I just hold it in place and try and tighten them in sequence once you've got the scope into its position. Then you can give your scope mount a final nip. Nip them up securely, but don't be too vicious and over tighten these neither. There's no need to have them ridiculously tight. By over tightening the scope mounts, all you'll probably do is damage the internal threads on the mounts. And that's about it. That concludes this video. That's the rifle built back up. and we're ready to go out and re-zero the scope. And I hope this video has helped you in some way. Strip down and rebuild your Weihrauch HW80. Thank you.